Welcome back, everyone. We're glad you're joining us today. We've got an intense story to share with you, so let's dive in. This is a tale of betrayal, lies, and a thirst for revenge. A man devoted his life to his family, only to discover that those closest to him had been deceiving him all along. When the truth finally surfaced, it changed everything. Introducing Ethan, a dedicated businessman and father of 3. Through years of hard work, he built a stable life for his family, ensuring they never went without. He wasn't wealthy, but he earned enough to provide a good home and a comfortable life for his wife, Lily, and their children. Ethan believed strongly in family, in responsibility, and doing the right thing. But Ethan's devotion extended beyond just his immediate family. He also supported his younger brother, Jack, who had always struggled to find his place in the world. Jack bounced from one job to another, never really settling down. As the dependable older brother, Ethan stepped in and gave him a job at his business, offering both financial and emotional support, thinking he was doing the right thing by keeping his brother close. On the surface, Ethan had the perfect family, a loyal wife, 3 happy children, and everything in order. But behind closed doors, things were not as they seemed. Ethan had no idea that both his wife and his brother were hiding a secret that would soon shatter his entire world. For the first year after the birth of their youngest child, Ethan never questioned anything. He adored his children and never felt the need to compare them. To him, they were his, and that was all that mattered. But as time passed, something began to feel off. The youngest child didn't resemble him as his older 2 did. Ethan had very distinct features, sharp eyes, a strong jawline, and a slightly curved nose. His older children had a mixture of these traits along with Lily's gentler features. But the last child, there was nothing about the baby's face that resembled Ethan's. At first, Ethan dismissed the thought. Genetics can be unpredictable, right? Maybe the child took after Lily's side of the family, or maybe the resemblance would become clearer as the child grew. He convinced himself that he was overthinking it. But then the comments began. Relatives, friends, even colleagues who had seen photos of his family began joking. "Wow, this one doesn't look anything like you." Some brushed it off as harmless banter, while others playfully pointed out how much the baby resembled Jack, Ethan's younger brother. That's when the unease turned into suspicion. Ethan smiled through the comments and brushed it off as family genetics, but deep down, it troubled him. The more he looked at the child, the more the resemblance to Jack became undeniable. Same eyes, same nose, even the same mannerisms. His mind began to race, but he had no proof, only a gut feeling that he couldn't ignore. He told himself he was being foolish. Lily had never given him a reason to doubt her, and Jack was his brother, someone he had always supported and trusted. But doubt is like a seed. It grows and festers. The more Ethan tried to push it aside, the more it consumed him. One day, unable to ignore his suspicions any longer, he made a decision. He ordered a DNA test for all 3 of his children, not just the youngest. While his curiosity was growing, he needed answers. When the DNA test results came back, Ethan had no idea what was waiting for him. He tore open the envelope and scanned the document, his eyes racing through the technical language until they landed on the truth, one that completely shattered everything he believed in. His youngest child was not his. The words blurred in front of his eyes as his mind refused to process it. He double-checked the numbers, hoping that perhaps, just perhaps, there had been a mistake. But science didn't lie, and that wasn't even the worst part. A biological match was clear. The child was still part of the family, but not as his son, as his nephew. Ethan's heart stopped. His brother, Jack, was the father. A wave of nausea hit him. Had his wife, Lily, been unfaithful with his brother? His mind rejected the idea at first. Jack was married. He had his own beautiful family, a wife, and a 4-year-old spoiled child. He had no reason to do this. Ethan had given him everything, brought him into the business, helped him rebuild his life when Jack had nothing. He couldn't have done this. Ethan thought of his loving wife, Lily, the woman he had trusted with his heart, the woman who had stood by him and built a life together, the mother of his children. She couldn't have cheated on him. She couldn't have carried another man's child while pretending it was his. Ethan refused to accept the report. He couldn't believe it. These people, his brother, his wife, couldn't betray him like this. But there was still the smallest possibility that something like this could happen. He had heard stories, seen it in the news. Instead of giving up or pretending it didn't matter, Ethan decided to investigate further. He wouldn't make accusations without solid proof. One evening, Ethan finally saw his opportunity. Lily was sitting next to him on the couch, scrolling through her phone as usual. A notification popped up on her screen, but she quickly swiped it away, her face giving nothing away. Ethan watched her out of the corner of his eye, pretending not to notice. Moments later, one of the kids called for her from upstairs. Without thinking, she jumped up, leaving her phone behind on the sofa. For the first few seconds, Ethan's body was tense. This was it. He had only minutes, maybe even less, before she came back. His hand instinctively reached for the phone. He unlocked it quickly, his fingers moving fast as he opened the messages. He scrolled past the usual conversations, texts from her friends, school updates, reminders, until he saw the name Jack. His hand tightened around the phone as he opened the chat and started scrolling through the messages between his wife and his brother. And that's when the truth hit him like a punch to the gut. The messages weren't old conversations. They were recent. They had been meeting in his own home, his own bedroom, his private space. They weren't sneaking off to hotels or meeting in secret places. No, they were doing it right under his roof, while he was at work, while the kids were at school. Not every day, but often enough. Enough to form a pattern, a long-standing, deliberate betrayal. Ethan heard footsteps coming down the stairs. He barely had time to lock the phone and drop it back on the couch before Lily re-entered the room. Ethan swallowed the rage that burned in his chest. Now, it wasn't just hurt, it was fury. That night, Ethan lay awake, staring at the ceiling, unable to escape the images in his mind. How long had this been going on? How long had he been blind to the truth? The thought churned his stomach. He had spent years building a life for his family, only to find out that the two people he trusted most had been quietly destroying it behind his back. For the first time in his life, Ethan felt completely powerless. He had always been the man who fixed things, who solved problems. But this wasn't something that could be repaired. No apology could undo the damage they had done. But he wasn't going to let them continue to play him for a fool. Ethan wasn't going to confront them immediately. He had seen men lose control in moments like this, yelling, smashing things, demanding answers, only to be met with more lies and manipulation. No, he wasn't going to give them a chance to worm their way out of it. He needed undeniable proof. He wanted to expose them in a way that left no room for doubt. So he made a decision: revenge. The next morning, while Lily took the kids out, Ethan went to work. He purchased hidden cameras, small, discreet ones that would blend into the surroundings. He knew exactly where to place them: the living room, the hallway, the kitchen, and most importantly, the bedroom. It took him hours to set everything up, positioning the cameras where they wouldn't be detected. He made sure they had remote access, so he could check the footage from his phone whenever he wanted. Once it was done, all he could do was wait. For days, Ethan checked the recordings, his heart pounding every time he opened the app. The waiting was agonizing, but he told himself to be patient. Then, after a week, it happened. Ethan had stepped out for work that morning, but his gut told him to check the footage. He pulled out his phone and opened the app. His breath caught in his throat when he saw what was happening. There they were, Lily and Jack, in his house, in his bedroom. His blood ran cold. There was no mistaking what was happening. It was all on camera. That morning, Jack had told Ethan that he was taking Lily to the hospital. He had looked him in the eyes, lied without hesitation, and then come straight to Ethan's home, straight to his bed. This was it. The proof he had been waiting for. The betrayal was undeniable. And now they were going to pay. Ethan debated whether to confront them immediately or expose them publicly. After days of thinking, he knew what his next move was going to be. He would lay everything out in front of the family, where there would be no room for excuses. He picked up his phone and began making calls. One by one, he invited everyone who mattered. His parents, Lily's parents, aunts, uncles, even cousins who had always been close to them. He told them it was urgent, something they all needed to hear. By the time the weekend arrived, nearly everyone had gathered at his parents' house. Ethan sat at the head of the room, his face unreadable. Jack was there, acting like nothing had changed, completely unaware of what was coming. Lily sat beside him, relaxed, completely oblivious to the storm that was about to hit her. Once everyone was gathered, and the low murmur of conversation died down, Ethan cleared his throat and stood. "I need everyone's attention," he said, his voice steady but heavy. "There's something you all need to see." Curious faces turned toward him. Jack leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, while Lily gave him a confused glance. Ethan pulled out his phone, connected it to the TV, and pressed play. The room fell into an oppressive silence. On the screen, the footage from the hidden cameras played in agonizing detail. Katie and Harrison, caught in the very home that Miles had built, in the very room that had once been a sanctuary for his family. Every moment, every betrayal was exposed for all to see. The silence broke abruptly. "What the hell is this?" a relative shouted, his voice shaking with disbelief. Harrison's wife gasped, her face turning white as the realization hit her like a punch to the gut. The man she had trusted, the one she thought she knew, had betrayed her with her own brother-in-law's wife. Katie's mother let out a choked sob, shaking her head in disbelief. Miles' father stood still, his face stone cold, his fists clenched in a silent storm of fury. Then the yelling began. "How could you do this to your own brother? You welcomed him into your home. You trusted him with your family." Miles, one of Miles' uncles, yelled, his voice trembling with anger. "This is despicable. This is a betrayal beyond anything I've ever seen." But what shook Miles to his core wasn't the anger. It was the unexpected support for Harrison. "This isn't the way to handle this," muttered one of Harrison's uncles, shaking his head in disapproval. "This should have been dealt with privately, not aired out in front of everyone." A cousin shifted uncomfortably, mumbling about how mistakes happen, how families should try to work through things, as if this could somehow be fixed. Miles' hands tightened into fists, his knuckles whitening. "Fix it," he snapped, voice dangerously calm. "How do you fix something like this?" His mother, her face crumpled with grief, turned to Harrison. "Please," she whispered, voice breaking, "tell me it's not true." Harrison opened his mouth, but no words came out. He could only look around, his eyes falling on the irrefutable evidence, the footage playing for everyone to see, the faces of his family, the people he had deceived and hurt. And in that moment, Harrison knew there was no escaping the truth. Katie sat there, trembling, unable to offer an explanation, unable to defend herself. And Miles stayed quiet, his silence louder than any words could ever be. He watched them flounder, watching them drown in the consequences of their actions. When the family meeting ended, Miles walked out, his mind clear and focused. His goal was singular. He was going to make Harrison feel the full weight of the betrayal he had wrought. The affair being exposed wasn't enough. The humiliation wasn't enough. He wasn't going to let this slide. Harrison was going to pay for every lie, every moment of deception. The first step was easy, cutting him off completely. For years, Miles had been the one to prop up Harrison. He'd given him a job, financial support, even covered for him when he made reckless decisions. Harrison had never had to face the consequences of his actions, because Miles had always been there to clean up his mess. But not anymore. The morning after the meeting, Miles called his legal team. Every financial connection between him and Harrison was severed. Harrison was removed from the business. Any money Miles had loaned him became a debt to be paid back immediately. Investments Harrison had through Miles' company were frozen. Harrison Harrison was cut off, left to face the consequences of his own choices. At first, Harrison thought Miles was bluffing. He showed up at the office, tried to reason with security, but it was too late. His name had already been scrubbed from every document, every contract, every file. Miles had made sure of it. The final blow came soon after. Miles had always respected Harrison's wife. She was kind, loyal, and devoted to their child. She didn't deserve the heartbreak Harrison had caused. So Miles reached out to her, offering her something she hadn't expected. "I'll cover all your legal fees," he told her. "Get the best divorce lawyer you can find. Take him for everything." It took her a moment to absorb the offer, but the shock soon gave way to anger. She accepted. What followed was a bitter, drawn-out divorce battle. Harrison, unprepared and now financially crippled, stood little chance against his wife's team of top-tier lawyers. While she had the best representation money could buy, Harrison could barely afford a decent attorney. His finances quickly dwindled, his assets were drained, and his life slowly crumbled. The court ruled in her favor. She received full custody of their child, the house, the car, and a substantial portion of his remaining wealth. Harrison was left with nearly nothing, just the clothes on his back, a few personal items, and a reputation in tatters. By the time the divorce was finalized, Harrison was not just financially ruined, he was completely destroyed. And Miles? He watched it all unfold, emotionless, unfeeling. He had destroyed Harrison, but he still had one final piece of business to attend to: Katie. She wasn't going to walk away from this untouched. She had betrayed him, lied to him for years, slept with his brother, and brought another man's child into his home, all while deceiving him. Miles was done with her. She wasn't going to keep anything that belonged to him, not after everything she had done. Weeks after the family meeting, Miles consulted with his legal team again. He wasn't interested in negotiating. He wanted full custody of their two children. He had the evidence, the DNA test results, the hidden camera footage, the messages, everything. When Katie received the divorce papers, she was stunned. She probably thought that Miles would give in, that for the sake of the kids, he would allow her to stay. She was wrong. She tried to apologize, to beg for forgiveness, but Miles wasn't listening. He had heard enough lies. She had proven herself untrustworthy. There was no chance for reconciliation. Miles wasn't interested in making amends. He was done. He had already won, and now nothing was going to stop him from getting what he wanted. Miles wasn't about to let Katie manipulate him again. The court proceedings moved quickly, and the outcome was as brutal as it was inevitable. Katie, with no resources to fight back, stood no chance. Miles had tried to seek joint custody, but the evidence stacked against Katie was undeniable. The judge, unsympathetic to her actions, had no patience for a woman who had not only betrayed her husband, but had brought his own brother into their home to carry on the affair. Miles was awarded full custody of their two children. The house stayed with him. Katie was forced to leave, taking only the child who wasn't his. She left with nothing but a meager settlement, barely enough to start over. Most people would have stopped there. Harrison's future was shattered, his finances destroyed. Katie was stripped of everything she had known, her home, her comfort, her security. But Miles wasn't done. He knew how people like Katie and Harrison operated. They would try to move on, reinvent themselves, and pretend as though none of this had ever happened. But Miles wasn't going to let that happen. They had burned his life to the ground, and he was going to make sure they carried the weight of their betrayal for years to come. So he made sure the truth spread naturally, but with intention. Miles worked quietly to ensure that the story was told to the right people. He didn't have to shout it from the rooftops. He simply shared the truth with mutual friends, colleagues, and anyone whose opinion could influence their lives. Harrison's former business partners, Katie's closest friends, even the people who still tried to defend them. Miles made sure they all knew what had really happened. The result was swift. Harrison quickly became a pariah, once a respected figure in his field. Now he found doors closing one by one. No one wanted to work with a man who had betrayed his own brother in such a humiliating way. His reputation was in tatters, and there was no coming back from that. Katie fared no better. Once a woman who thrived on social standing, on the admiration of others, she was now the subject of whispers and judgmental stares. People didn't want to be seen with her. They didn't want to be associated with someone who had so blatantly betrayed her husband with his own brother. She struggled to rebuild her life with nothing but the scraps left behind. No stable home, no financial support, no respect from the social circles that had once adored her. Miles didn't have to do anything else. Their downfall was complete, and he watched it unfold without a second thought. As he looked at his children, safe and secure in the home that was still his, he knew one thing for sure: he had won. And that, my friends, is how Miles took revenge on those who betrayed him. He didn't act impulsively. He didn't let his emotions drive him. He planned. He executed. He stayed patient. In the end, he walked away with everything while they were left with nothing. His brother lost his wife, his money, and his reputation. His ex-wife lost her home, her stability, and any chance at redemption. And through it all, Miles made sure the people who mattered, the ones who would remember and pass judgment, knew the truth. Now, the question remains: did Miles go too far, or was his revenge justified? If you were in his shoes, how would you have handled it? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.
Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button and turn on notifications so you never miss more shocking real-life stories like this. See you in the next one.